there comes a point in every person's life, especially a man's life, where you know you kind of have to bet on yourself and you have
Mhm.
to bet on your own dopeness.
Welcome to the Masking Tapes. I'm your host, Carolina Hidalgo-McCabe, and I'm so excited to step into this conversation about food, fitness, race, what it means to be a man today, especially with all the pressures on social media, and how an entrepreneur can make it from his parents' couch to the phones of millions of young people, helping motivate them and impact his community. I'm so excited to be joined by Kevin Curry, the founder of Fit Men Cook, for this episode. Welcome to the Masking Tapes. I'm so honored to be joined by Kevin Curry, the founder of Fit Men Cook, which is an online community that inspires healthy eating and fitness through food. And so, Fit Men Cook, which, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it started in 2012 as a blog and has grown substantially into a community for millions of people, a cookbook, an app, and also different TV specials and programs. And so, can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, we'll backtrack a little bit. What got you into food, fitness, and through the lens of also sharing it on social media too?
Well, I think what really got me into food and fitness is realizing that those two things held the key to me changing my life. At the moment when I started to get really serious about it, I was in a really dark rut. I was pretty depressed, not happy where I was. I was broke as a joke on my parents' couch. I was getting on food stamps, and just it's like the perfect storm of everything, just to not to make you not feel at your best. And so it was through that I just said, all right, I got to make a change. And I couldn't afford a change, meaning I couldn't afford to hire a personal trainer. I couldn't afford to go and do these expensive programs. And I would talk to people and ask these questions, and they'd say, oh, yeah, it's going to cost you this much money. And I'm like, okay, Kev.
Yeah.
Okay, you went to a great high school. You can read, you went to college, you went to grad school, you can figure this stuff out. And so I went to half price books and just started to read books about nutrition. And then I grew up in the South, and I grew up with good food in the house. I also didn't believe that like eating well and eating healthy was gonna should taste poorly, right? So
Hmm.
I just kind of backtracked. I took foods that I really liked, and then I would break them down to their core components, and then I would just recook them, but in a much more nutrient dense way. And so my journey into this was a much more journey of desperation. I was desperate for a change. I think you can look at this in almost any aspect of the world, but wonderful things are born out of resource lacking environments, like creative
Yeah.
solutions, right? You start to get
Yeah.
really creative and really, innovative. And so that's how my journey began. It began in the kitchen. It wasn't supposed to be, but yeah.
Wow. That's so cool how you took from not having something that you were lacking and instead turned that into something that you excel at and succeed at and have built such a community around too. And I'd love to get more into the food and fitness, but to backtrack
Mhm.
to where all of my episode starts, Kevin, what is one of the hardest things about being a man in this world right now?
I've never really been asked this, not really. I've never been asked this question before. I don't think it's one that I've spent time, um, thinking about too. What I will say though, what immediately comes to mind is that it's hard to talk about what's the hardest part about being a man in America or in my reality without the introduction of race.
Hmm.
Like my identity as a black man, and the way I move and am perceived and move around like in the world, I see that part kind of influencing the difficulty of being a man, just because one thing that I will say from that lens, the most difficult part about that is having to always campaign for my dignity as a
Mm.
man, in spaces, and not being too aggressive, you know, but being passive enough, and it just fundamentally, like distills down to perhaps just being misunderstood. And I think
Hmm.
that's a tough part about being a man. And then when you introduce other things in there like race, it just compounds that, that feeling about being misunderstood even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that and providing that lens as well. You mentioned the term dignity, and I wonder how do you feel like food and cooking also is a bestower, restorer of dignity in some way, and how has that kind of impacted your relationship with dignity itself?
Yeah, food is all about choice, right? And um, it's hard when we live in this society, and when I say like this society, this Western society of
Hmm.
excess, it comes so easily. It comes so easy to us. And I started to get involved in recent years with food advocacy. And when you look at people, when you look at the numbers and statistics of people who are actually really needing, or actually in need of food and are actually starving, we often think, okay, those people are actually abroad. No, they're actually right next door. They are our like community members. And then that took me down the rabbit hole about like, all right, Kev, so how can I help out? You know, let me go and give like to the food pantry. Let me go and do this. Right? Sure, we do those things. What about legislation? Oh, okay, well, Kevin, if if you support this bill or that bill, they get to have more food stamps, less food stamps, et cetera, et cetera. And
Hmm.
really, what I've seen through this whole entire process is that it's all about choice. Like, I get to wake up today. I woke up and I said, I'm going to eat this.
Hmm.
And I walked into my kitchen and I walked into the pantry, into the fridge, pulled out the stuff, and I made myself a meal.
Yeah.
And I don't recognize there's a lot of dignity in me being able to decide what I get to do, what I get to eat each day.
Yeah.
When you look at somebody who is food insecure, that choice is often robbed. When you look at somebody who is in a food desert, they are robbed of that choice.
Hmm.
It's only limited to literally like what is around them, what they can literally access. So that's why I call them healthful recipes, but I think nowadays I like to say more like much more nourishing recipes, because I believe that wellness belongs to any like wellness belongs to everybody, and regardless of what
Hmm.
income you are, regardless where you live, regardless of what language you speak, you can be well where you are. And so I like to try to give that back to people by showing them solutions, giving them ideas. I don't always make the mark there.
Hmm.
It's hard, but at least I try. But what's wrapped up in that resolve is this idea to give dignity to people.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it reminds me, I was listening to one of your reels and you had said exactly what makes people healthier is not shame, not control, but more money, more support, and more dignity. So I love that we've come back to that point that you share with your audiences. It's not just here's this fast, healthy meal that you can cook, but like how does this bring back this level of dignity and reduce these barriers to be able
Yeah,
to not only provide for yourself, but I imagine lots of people are using these recipes to provide for their families. And
yeah,
especially as a man and this expectation of provider status, if you're living in a food desert per se, and you're
yeah.
not able to provide healthful food to your family members or your kids, that's a huge impact on your dignity, your ability to navigate those roles in society as well.
Absolutely. When you just distill that down to the fundamental role of a parent or like a provider or whatnot, you want to be able to do that. And so when you feel that you can, I mean, you just gotta imagine like what that does to one's psyche.
Hmm.
What that does. And so then, you see people come into the food pantry and you see them kind of just like shy, like, should I reach for this? Should I not reach for this? And
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I love about the ones that I work at, or volunteer with, is that they're set up like a grocery store, and you go in there and you pick out what you want. And sure, it's quote unquote, well, it's the same thing if you would come through and just put everything into a box and give it to people. Yeah, maybe so. But one thing that we're doing this way is that we're giving people choice. And choice is something that is one of the most precious things that we take for granted. But when it's taken away from you, that's when you notice it.
It's that absence of it that becomes so, you know,
Hmm.
all encompassing. And
Yeah.
so going a little bit back to your journey getting into cooking, was there any pushback from the people around you when you decided that you wanted to be spending more time in the kitchen? And what was this reaction like from others when all of a sudden it became a profession for you?
Yeah, I think that for the people around me, like my family, it was already real for them before it was real for me. And for
Mhm.
me, it was a hobby, it was a passion project. It was my escape from corporate America. It was my way to say, "Oh, you know what? Here is something where I can show up in the world and matter. I'm not on this hamster wheel, like for good." So it was that for me, but the people around me got it pretty early on, and I remember a couple things happened when I started doing the Fit Men Cook stuff. I was working over at Dell at the same time, and I was in comms, but here's this blog called Fit Men Cook, and it's a passion project of mine. Around the same time, I get this job offer from Google, and this is around the time that Google was doing the Google Spaces and stuff. I got this job offer, and I went down there to interview for it and everything, and they gave me the job offer, and I'm sitting here, and I got this Fit Man Cook thing that's kinda just like it's starting to take off, and I had no idea. I wasn't trying to have it take off. And so I go back to my old boss, and this is PR firm, and this is basically this PR firm would be the equivalent of Scandal, like Olivia Pope. They're these people, they are cutthroat. They are fixers or solvers, and I got to be mentored by them. So this is the
Mm.
thing, right? They're also very, very, very just blunt. So I went back to my own boss, and he said, "Hey, what's going on?" And so I told him the scenario about, should I do this thing? Should I do this thing, with Google? Should I do this thing with Fitman Cook? And so he says, "Okay, everyone here in the office keeps talking about this thing called Fitman Cook, and I have no idea what the hell it is." All right. And he says, "But if you've got to come to me and ask me if you want to take a job at Google or do this, that means you don't want to take a job at Google because no one turns down a
Mm.
job at Google. So
Damn.
my advice to you is this." He says, "You need to go ahead and do this thing called Fit Men Cook, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to sit your grandkids down and say, 'Here's this thing called Fit Men Cook. Here's how I effed it all up, or here's how I did it well. Go do something even better.'"
Wow.
And the last thing he said to me was, he said, "You walked away from my company, and I'd hire you back today if you wanted to come back."
Mm.
And all of that happened just at the right time. It was like everything that I needed to hear at that moment that I just didn't realize. One was there comes a point in every person's life, especially a man's life, where you know you kind of have to bet on yourself, and you have
Mhm.
to bet on your own dopeness. And this other man, which I perhaps I didn't need him to affirm it, but he just affirmed me in that you are dope. You can get a job. You can do this if you wanted to. You can come back to us. I would hire you
Yeah.
back. You're that dope, my guy. Right? Those are the things you kind of have like in your mind. You're talking to yourself, right? You're big up in yourself. And then this whole idea that, like, I didn't wanna be haunted, and so that's when I decided to take the leap. And I remember it was during Thanksgiving. We went around the table, and we talked about what we were thankful for, and they got to me, and I said, "I think I'm gonna quit my job."
Wow. That's
And
one
everybody
place to
stopped
drop that
and
news.
I know, but I wanted to out myself. I wanted to out myself in front of everybody. So
So that
everyone
they could hold
stopped.
you accountable.
Yeah, and guess what they said?
What?
"Finally."
Wow.
And that struck me, and I was like, "Wow," I just because they're the ones who were like, "Okay, finally, good. Go and do this."
Mm.
So having that support from my parents and family felt really good.
It's so interesting because I think for myself, I came out of college a couple years ago, and I've seen a lot of the young men in my life who are really passionate about things figure out how to mute those passions to go after the like
Yeah.
secure finance job that will make sure that they're going to get a certain level of income, they can have a certain apartment or whatever it may be that they're looking for. And I've had conversations with a lot of my male friends about like what drives you, what excites you, and that's a huge crux to be able to like bet on yourself, to bet on your own dopeness, and instead of going the path that everyone else is going that might be more reliable. Like, what does risk taking look like these days when so much is curated for your comfort, where like dating apps are curated for your comfort? You don't have to go and approach someone in person. Like, you could just swipe from the comfort of your home. And so I do think that this risk taking that you took that then has taken you on this totally different life trajectory is super inspiring. So, if you were talking to a young man today that was maybe in your exact same shoes, trying to decide between a comfortable banking job right now or something that they're actually passionate about, how do you think the current context we're in would change the advice that you have?
The current context, I mean, of where we are right now in society, or
As a
just
society, yeah, as a
okay.
society, as a world, in this economy, in this
Yeah.
economy.
First off, I'd say, you also you have to have faith, but you also need to be able to know the difference between faith and foolish. So what I'd say to that young man is that that you won't go wrong by betting on yourself, and that you need to take a plan, but you need to have a plan first. You don't just jump out there. I kind of was thinking about something else when you were talking,
Mhm.
because it kind of got me back to your first question about what's the most difficult part about being a man, and you were talking about just kind of jumping out there, and I was like, well, that is a difficult part about being a man, is being able to chart your own path in a society that is, gosh, it seems like almost everything is kind of curated for you, or your
Yeah.
expectations about like what you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to act, what you're supposed to do. And so, yeah, we talk about individualism, we talk about being unique, but everyone really just, at the end of the day, it is a little bit of just, rinse and repeat. And so I think it is very difficult to step out there and do something that is outside of the norm, even if it's me doing that. It may not be out of your norm, but that's out of my norm,
Yeah.
just because wrapped up in that are all these expectations that people have around me. Like, what are my family, and friends are gonna think? What if I fail? Am I gonna be looking stupid in front of my friends? Um, I actually cooked for my friends one time, and the food was not so great. So what are they gonna think about me doing this food
Mm.
blog and stuff? And so you have all of these things, but it takes courage to live outside of those expectations and those norms that people would place on you. And I think that's a hallmark of being a person, but I definitely think that's a hallmark of being a man, in
Yeah.
society today.
Yeah, and showing up in the kitchen, you don't have to be an expert chef, like figuring out how do you
Yeah.
throw things, how do you learn, and also look for instructions, look for recipes and those kinds of things that can help guide you. And I think
Right.
I have a friend who once told me like, "Oh, I don't bake because I don't follow instructions." He was like, "I can cook, like I can throw
That's
things in a
awesome.
pot, but baking requires instructions and I don't do those." And I was like, "Oh, like that's interesting. Like how do
I respect
you
that.
you
I
respect that?"
respect that. Oh, I get that. I get that fully.
What do
That's
you think that is? Like
1000%.
what's the crux of men maybe being less willing to do things that require like even like my dad assembling something, a piece of furniture, like he will not read the instructions for the life of him. It's like he
Right.
has to wait till my mom gets so frustrated that she reads them for him.
I think at the end of the day, it maybe boils down to, like, people always say that men have egos. Yes, we do have egos, but the ego is tied to something. It's tied to a sense of worth. And at the end of the day, I think we always want to be the hero. We
Mm.
we wanna have the cape. And so, yeah, I don't need this. I can figure it out myself. I don't need directions. I will figure it out. I don't need instructions how to put this together. I will figure it out. I don't baking? No. And guess what happens? Baking is the equalizer, though. Bake
Mm.
baking is the equalizer. Says, "Hey, it doesn't matter if you don't wanna read the instructions, you can, you know what? Wing it at your own peril, but it will be disgusting." This is
It
one of the
really
only
will.
things that you have to follow
Yeah.
these steps in this order, in this way. No, you cannot melt the butter first. You've got to put the butter in kinda cold, and you gotta lump it up first. So, it's one of those things where you have to go step by step.
It will absolutely humble you. It will absolutely humble you. You're in the wellness space on social media, and the wellness space has transformed a lot since when you first hopped on Instagram and started Fit Men Cook in 2012. Where do you see what your page and your community has created in the sphere of a lot of male fitness influencers right now who are trying to attract young men?
Okay, so let me, I guess I'll answer that by asking you that. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell me, based off of what you're saying, and because it's a question that you've also, like, you've observed something. So what are you
I
observing?
mean, I think to me, what I'm observing is there's a definite demand for male fitness influencers that are especially focusing on the gym and other physical fitness, strategies, tactics, etc. And I was just with a friend, and I thank all my male friends who help me with the research I do and let me scroll through their algorithms and kind of see what's going on. And we were going down all these different, male influencers that are specifically focused on gym workouts, et cetera, and how do you bulk, how do you do this, how do you do that. But you see the narrative online a lot more about like the Andrew Tates of the world and thinking about the like toxic sides of the manosphere, et cetera. But at the same time, when I was like scrolling through and looking at some Noah Dreisel's videos, like he also has like a gym workout where he's talking about like how he got through a hard breakup. And so he's able
Yeah.
to infuse, and there's other people who do like fitness is political, and he talks about like what's happening in politics while he's doing his workout. So there is this spectrum that I think is often missed in the narrative, in these articles, and in the crisis of masculinity conversation of oh, there's a good amount of men online who are doing like pretty healthy and positive and more justice oriented work within the health and fitness sphere too. And I think that you're one of the things that excites me about Fit Man Cook is where you use your platform not only for just supporting people with recipes and instructions, but also with awareness of what's going on beyond the kitchen. Is that an appropriate analysis of where you think you are in this space? That's my
Yeah.
outside analysis.
Yeah. Um, I would say yes. It's not just about recipes. Recipes were like that's the heritage and that's the hook,
Yeah.
right? But people have stayed with me for much longer just because I talk a little bit about just everything there is, to wellness, and it's about the travel. It's about the volunteering,
Mm,
it is about the fitness. And so really what I think people can see within my page is that they don't see a lot of judgment. They see somebody that's literally on their own journey. And that's how, for me, it's been helpful. Why I think that I've been able to, I guess, perhaps survive a little bit longer than some other bloggers is that I've never really subscribed to some sort of like, hey, this is it. So this is the
mm,
carnivore diet. This is the keto.
yeah.
You only got to do this, or this is this way of it. Health is a journey. And our bodies are just evolving. Our preferences are evolving. Our behaviors are evolving constantly. And so I just allow myself just to evolve, and I'm sharing my journey publicly. And it's always
Yeah.
been, hey, this has worked for me. If it doesn't work for you, all right, cool. But I'm just gonna share it with you anyway. Like,
Yeah. No, I think the lack of judgment comes across a lot and is an inviting tool to bring people in and to take you on that journey and in the phases of life where you fall into and out of passion for
yeah.
cooking and for food, it goes along with you in that journey too because it's so much more authentic. What got you to name it Fit Men Cook in the first place? Specifically the men part.
Yeah, it was a really split decision to go and do that. I needed a name for Tumblr. I was every morning I would always journal, and one of the things that I had been journaling a lot around, that time was just about like what it means to actually make a change or how change actually happens. And I was realizing that the better I ate, the much more changes I actually saw. And so it was much more about like, okay, you know, if the fit men cook, I literally just said that. I was like, okay, so fit guys, Kevin cook. Oh, fit men cook. And so I just put it into Tumblr, and that was it. It literally wasn't like too much
It's,
more than
it's
that.
straight to the point. It gets
Yeah,
it right to it.
and it's a
Um,
reminder for me, like, what's most important right now is, like, cooking, because you could jog your way, you can out-train or try to out-train a poor diet, but at the end of the day, if your food is not right, change can't happen. It won't happen.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I feel like in a time where so much is in the air that there's like this massive loss of control of like I don't know where I'm going to be next week. I don't know if I'm going to have a job next month, like et cetera. Those emotions around people. To me, cooking is a great way to be able to like maybe depending on your access to different food items, et cetera, and resources is a way to take some control back into your own hands of like what am I going to put in my body today and what can I
Right.
figure out how to do make do with what I have.
Correct. And, that's just a perfect way, like, to say it, and from a from a therapeutic standpoint, that's why I was also cooking. It just felt good.
Mm,
Not feeling at my best, it just felt really great to be able to do something from start to finish. From saying, "All right, I'm gonna make this sandwich," and even if it's just a sandwich, like you did it, and there's a sense of like satisfaction. And so, yeah, when so much of your day is out of your hands, you get to control what you're about to put in your mouth.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
that right there is enough to get you up and to make yourself a sandwich, because you know what? You are fully in control when you look at it like that.
Yeah. I I'm going to close off this episode by asking you the question that I ask everyone to close out the episode, which is, what is something you love about being a man?
I was gonna say, just like as a whole, I do think that it's a great benefit to be given the benefit of the doubt
Mm.
a little bit, like off jump from things.
Tell me
If
more about that.
um let's say a split decision has to happen, and yeah, it's a pressing issue, and maybe it's between like a man like and a woman, and there are two people there, and it's a tough decision. You've got to make a really quick call.
Mhm.
Oftentimes I think people would listen to the man, especially
Mhm.
if it's like an emotional type of that situation. They're gonna give deference to him, and so I just think that sometimes that is a really, it's a I'm not saying it like this is the best part. This is a great
Yeah,
benefit of being
no,
a
no,
man, but it comes to
absolutely.
mind that, like, oh, you know what? It is a pretty nice privilege just to be given, the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
just off jump. Um,
Yeah. And then to use that for good too, to figure out like, okay, to whom much is given, much is expected. Like, how do I use this kind of benefit of the doubt to
right,
provide for people, protect people, all these things.
right, yeah.
Wow. That's the first time I've gotten that answer. I actually really am so interested in that. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Kevin, this has been a joy of a conversation and getting a little bit of a lens into your world and Fit Men Cook and the kind of community that you've cultivated, but with not just health, but also with a sense of purpose to community in the broader sense of service. And so I just thank you for the work that you do and recommend that anyone listening to this follow you and join that community. And I'll just continue to follow along and cook your recipes as I train for a half marathon right now. So
Heck
they've been
yeah,
super helpful right now. So thank you.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the conversation today.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Masking Tapes. I am so excited to continue to grow and expand this podcast and feature different individuals and influencers that inspire you and inspire us to be better every single day. And I'm just so grateful for Kevin's time on this podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at maskingtapes.pod. Find us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for the Substack and support us on Patreon. There are so many ways to be involved. You can find Kevin on Instagram at FitMenCook or on his website, fitmencook.com, to find recipes, his cookbook, and so much more. This episode was edited by JD Gorman, and the music is by Solomon Abutam. Until next time.